next, Roland Walker, and his guest in studio right now is Member of Parliament for Sekondi, Andrew Ejapamesa. He's on the show alongside Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa on the AM Talk. So stay with us. Great conversations coming up here on the show this Monday. All right.
Oh, thank you, Mama. You're a great survivor too. But you're surviving beautifully. That's the point. The person was living 250. Oh, they told you, survive. Mama, you have to be gracious to God.
I have an idea. I think we should be asking our members of parliament what they survive on as well. Yeah.
Look, we have Andrew Ejapamesa here. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning, my good friend.
Yeah, he's more than a survivor.
Are you sure?
That's good. When you work hard, you have to enjoy the fruits of your labor. I picked that from Imano Chamantin Hejako. When I told him, Charlie, he's well off, he said, look, when you work hard, you have to enjoy the fruits of your labor.
I guess so. and motivate everybody else to work hard.
He's a member of parliament for Sekondi. He'll be joined by a member of parliament for Northton, Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa. He issued a statement on subject of migration, things that the president needs to take more responsibility on the subject of the influx of Ghanaian migrants through the Mediterranean, or before then the Sahara, the Mediterranean, and then get to the shores of Lampedusa, Italy, Spain, Portugal, etc. And the subject of a ship that was not accepted by the authorities of Italy, went to the Maltese coast, but ultimately had to reverse back to the coast of Spain, and then they accepted those. But well, so as Okujeto comes in, we'll look at all that. But before then, the Vice President has been speaking about, we'll bring you that insight about the inflated cost of hospital. Apparently, he made that observation after looking through the cost of some hospital projects, which so far have now been stalled, even though we're told that they'll try to resume them. But he was worried about those costs before, and now wants to streamline all that. Let's get that insight, and then we'll come to the subject of what we have to do for the discussions.
At a recent meeting of the economic management team, which the senior minister referenced just a few minutes ago, it emerged that Ghana constructs 60 to 80 bed district hospitals for $25 million. 60 to 80 bed district hospitals for $25 million. That day, even though I don't speak Fanti, I had to say Ebe. Today, you will hear the African Development Bank constructed a 150-bed hospital in Accra a few years ago for 5.76 million Ghana cedis, or the equivalent of about $1.3 million, which was without equipment. But you are talking about a 150-bed hospital constructed around $1.3 million. And even if we have to equip this for $1 or $2 million, the total cost would be some $3 million. So how come we are building 60 to 80 bed hospitals for $25 million? And this figure, the Minister of Finance will know, this $25 million figure does not include the tax exemptions that we are giving for bringing in equipment for these hospitals. That is an additional cost to the budget. It is therefore imperative that at the same time as we are seeking suitable investment opportunities to meet the infrastructure gap, the government takes steps to ensure cost-efficient program design and delivery to reduce financial wastage and protect the public purse. Ladies and gentlemen, it is in this respect that the government, under the leadership of His Excellency President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, has committed to seeking the investment required for the construction of roads, schools, and hospitals, and at the same time maximizing the efficiency of existing expenditure on these infrastructures to ensure value for money.
And that's the observation made by the Vice President. It's not the first time the Vice President has been talking about the inflated cost of projects, especially experience in the elsewhere administration. But we've had some responses also coming from the former Health Minister Alex Segbefia. Let's take that response and then we'll come and do the discussions as well. And we know that, well, we have to put all that into perspective after this.
I'm at a loss as to how I'm supposed to deal with this comparison. One, with the little knowledge I have, as I've said many a time, if I go and I want to buy a vehicle, if the engine is 1.6 engine and the engine on the same vehicle is 2.3 liters and one is 1.6, I can bet my bottom dollar that the price will never be the same. So what is under the hood or what is actually within the item you are buying or what items you are getting would depend or would change the price of the contract completely. So you may be comparing apples with oranges. In other words, they are all fruits, but they're actually very different. So without looking at the contract which is referring to in the ADB, to decide what was going into that hospital, and then looking at the contract that we had signed as a government, how do you make a genuine and a fair comparison of what you are actually paying for? So I think that without getting the details of both contracts, it's something that politicians commonly do, but I think it is not the right way to go, especially at the level of the vice presidency. It is important that you get a little bit more detail of what the contracts entail, and then when you speak with a certain level of authority and do the comparison at that time so that people can not just simply on the beds, because hospital construction involves a lot. Even if you hadn't, for example, got the land and you were even going to purchase land where you were going to, it can change the price of what you were going to buy or deal with completely if you were not going to get it by compulsory acquisition, and the compensation was involved for land, etc. So there are many factors, and without looking at what each contract is doing, I think that it's an unfair comparison. That is number one. At what point does any contract that is signed at this level at what point does it not involve the minority of any government? Because it goes through Parliament. The first thing that you have to take note of is that it will originate from a ministry, which is government of the day. It then moves from the ministry to cabinet, where there's an approval given. And then from cabinet, it goes to Parliament. Parliament will immediately send it to the subcommittee that oversees it. Mostly two, one for the health side and one for finance. So they will both look at the figures at that subcommittee level. And that, at that point, it involves members of all the political parties that are in Parliament, mostly the majority and the minority.
And that's Alex Segbefia, a former health minister in the John Mahama administration. And your response to this? Because we know this has taken a different turn on social media, it's gained more traction, and the comments have been varied.
Well, I guess good morning is appropriate to your good self and our cherished viewers this morning. It's unfortunate how Mr. Segbefia seeks to justify the cost that His Excellency the Vice President revealed yesterday that is attached to some of these infrastructure projects that we do. Yes, Parliament may have approved it, but Parliament do not interrogate the basis for the contracts that are submitted to them. Of course, they look at the financing and the cost implication on the state. You may have done your bills of quantities and submit same through the approval process to Parliament. So you cannot blame or indicate or justify the cost by saying that the minority in Parliament also participated in the approval process, so that makes it okay or the cost justifiable. Because the Vice President did not speak in vacuum. He situated it in proper context. That we have a situation in this country where contract sums for projects that we do are so varying from ones that are done by international multi-donor donor agencies and even private individuals as opposed to government. And he cited a hospital, 100-bed or 120-bed hospital that had been built by the ADB for the equivalent of $1.3 million US. And the government of Ghana built a 60 to 80-bed hospital for $25 million. Clearly, without the benefit of the ADB figures, you may think that the 25 million is justifiable because the cost possibly may have been vetted by some institution or the other and passed a certain value for money test. But if you have the benefit of the ADB figures and you do a simple comparison, you would notice that there must be something wrong somewhere. And so going forward, government has taken steps to standardize contracts that we award in the roads and health and education sector. So we have some indicative figures for how much we pay for a 6-classroom block unit going forward, for a 100-bed hospital unit going forward, for a kilometer of road going forward. These are solutions. And indeed, the Vice President, if you listen to his statement, did not even politicize the issue. He just put the figures as they are and did not attribute it to any particular government, but said that, look, this is where we find ourselves as a country, and that these are the steps that we are taking to standardize some of these things so that we can save huge sums of money to the public purse. Then Mr. Segbefia comes to attempt to justify the cost by saying that, well, land and some other factors may contribute to the cost of these projects, and that the Vice President is comparing apples to oranges. Assuming without admitting that the Vice President is comparing apples to oranges. A 100-bed hospital built by one individual, let's just say at Kaswa or some village in the western region, for 1.3 million. You build an 80-bed hospital at Airport Residential for 25 million. Is that what he's saying? Because the cost of land at airport is higher. How much is an acre of land at airport? So, I mean, let's be nationalistic in some of these things. It is not the case that some blame has been attributed to anybody. But then again, like they say, who the cap fits clearly would wear it. And so if Mr. Segbefia feels guilty that they presided over award of contracts for $25 million to build a 60 to 80 bed hospital, and they've been exposed by comparing it to, and even the one that is even most significant is the Dangote one, where he built a 1,000-bed hospital for 20 million, and we built a 60-bed hospital for 25 million. It's an indictment on themselves, and I think if they have some blame to attribute, they who presided over the award of those contracts, and I don't even know or can't confirm as a matter of fact, because the Vice President didn't say so, that it was during their era that these things were done. But like I said, maybe the cap fits him, and so that's why he's wearing it and seeking to justify it by passing the blame around. This cannot, under any circumstances, be passed around at all.
Well, but the refrain on social media and the corresponding reflection of the commentary has been about how the Vice President in his own government has not been able to check or be able to verify the cost of some projects as itemized in the budget. For example, in the Ministry of Special Initiatives Budget Estimation or Appropriation, we're told that a mechanized borehole, mechanized toilet facilities, a number of them will cost some 187 million Ghana cedis. We've had a number of them. There was even a website that was later clarified, and a number of projects for which even we have a pro-pressure group, AFAC, come to raise concerns about those number of projects.
You see, yesterday I was on a platform with one gentleman.
And this was raised?
Yeah, this was raised. That
smacks of
mechanized borehole cost 132,000, because if you extrapolate the number that is going to be built, I think 1,000 across the country. But you see, the truth is, they are not building mechanized boreholes.
It's not a borehole, it's a mechanized water system.
It's a water system.
Yes.
Okay.
It's still inflated at 132,000.
Roland, unless, yeah, we can debate that. And sitting here, I do not have the competencies to verify or disclaim those figures. But if it is the case that people have figures that clearly demonstrate that these budgetary allocations that have been made, which have not been awarded, it's not like contracts have been awarded at these costs. It's budget estimates.
Yeah, true. From
And
appropriation,
so,
you go to
yes, of course. I mean, appropriations are made, but not the entire amounts are necessarily disbursed. Okay, so let's situate it in their proper context. If it is in fact the case that these water systems do not cost up to that much, by all means, let's raise it. But to suggest that without any basis that these are inflated, I think doesn't help the conversation.
Then on what basis also is the Vice President estimating?
That's why I said that,
the
you see,
inflated costs. When we've had the corresponding response from the former Health Minister,
Roland, the Vice President clearly situated the issues in context. That we have a situation where the African Development Bank has constructed a hospital, 100-bed, for the equivalent of 1.3 million. Yet, the government of Ghana is constructing the same 60 to 80-bed hospital for 25 million. That clearly is basis for comparison. But if you are unable to tell me that,
because what Alassane is saying, that we've had,
that's why I said that
we've had agreements for projects which have gone through Parliament, and you're a member of Parliament. You know that it is referred to a committee to take a look at in most instances.
Let's just say that, yes, that process was carried out. And so that is justification for saying that these figures are legitimate.
Well, the committee, you don't look into such projects, you don't look at the quantities, etc.
And that even if you are shown that, well, these same hospitals cost 1.3 million when it's being done by a multinational agency. You say that, well, because Parliament approved it, nobody should question it. Is that the argument?
Well, we'll take a look.
That clearly cannot be.
Well, we know that this is still dominating the discussions on mainstream media, but also on social media. And when you go on to Facebook, etc., you have all the comments from not only media personnel, but also just general observers of what the news has been over the last 12 hours as the Vice President was seen sourced to that very news that is circulated. But we also know that we spoke to the Deputy Chief of Staff, a statement now we're told that had been leaked, apparently, just an internal memo from the Chief of Staff to all government ministers and other government appointees about a ban in the interim on all travels abroad, with the exception of some needed permission from the presidency, which has since also raised questions about whether there was an abuse of the process or not. Now we bring you that excerpt from the Deputy Chief of Staff. And when we come back, we'll be having invited into the discussion the Member of Parliament for North Tongue, who is also a ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa. He also travelled to a number of the shores across the Mediterranean, just around Europe, and had been assessing the state of Ghanaian migrants as well as other states of African migrants. Stay on, we'll be right back.
The president thinks that it's about time we standardize the modalities or framework within which government officials travel out of our country. And therefore, he's put a temporary ban on foreign travels by ministers, deputy ministers, MMDCs, and head of government agencies, with a view of giving us the space to formulate this modality to regulate foreign travels by government officials. Well, his hope is that when that is done, it will, one, certainly save cost if we were to minimize foreign travels by government officials, given the framework within which these travels will be embarked upon. Two, it will also result in having government officials in the jurisdiction to embark on the all-important domestic work of government business. So generally is taking the issue of foreign travels and approvals or otherwise another step further one step further in terms of how we will put in place a standardized framework to regulate foreign travels by government officials.
So the two problems we are seeking to solve are one, cost, and two, the furtherance of the domestic agenda of government.
Those are the benefits that we hope to achieve for the Ghanaian people with this sort of arrangement.
And this is not something that can be done without banning them temporarily. I mean, can they not go about their business while you make these assessments?
Well, so the whole idea is that when you put a ban, and once the ban will be lifted with the birth of these modalities, right? So when the ban is lifted, we all will be fully appraised of the framework within which travels can be embarked upon. I'll give you an example. For the past year and a half, for instance, the president has insisted that all ministers attend cabinet meetings. And as you may be aware, President Akufo-Addo has been exceptional when it comes to cabinet meetings. He's held cabinet meetings every fortnight since he came into office, and he takes cabinet very seriously, and therefore insists that all ministers should attend cabinet. So as a matter of general rule, the chief of staff will normally disallow any request for travel if that request or that travel will coincide with a cabinet date. For instance, conferences, government of Ghana and the people of Ghana are represented at numerous conferences across the world. The question as to, number one, what conference should we participate in? Two, if we were to participate in a conference, what sort of representation should we have at a conference? Should it be a ministerial representation or a deputy ministerial representation or a director from the ministry or head of an agency? All of these questions which do not have a definitive answer to, these modalities will seek to answer all these questions. So it will achieve also two matters of certainty. One, the members of government will be fully aware of the sort of travels which will be encouraged. And the chief of staff will also have a framework within which he will exercise their discretion.
And that was the Deputy Chief of Staff speaking to Kojo Yankson in that interview there. And since then, we've had some reactions, and it's good that we have the ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament, but also Member of Parliament for North Tongue, Samuel Okujeto-Ablakwa, also joining us for the discussions. Good morning to you, Samuel.
Yeah, good morning.
And you had some responses yesterday. I was listening to Radio Gold, and you also said it was because government's own ability to maintain discipline, the structure of government is in total disarray. But that's not fair, is it?
Oh, it's very fair. Good morning, Frank. Good morning to our distinguished viewers. I mean, that's a very fair assessment I did. And if you have listened to analysts, they share my point of view. Really, let's assess the content of the memo. The memo says that the government is banning foreign travels now temporarily, and that they will want to avoid disruption in government's domestic work. Avoid disruption in government's domestic work. I have served in the executive on 2 occasions, under Professor Mills and under President Mahama. Professor Mills's chief of staff was John Henry Newman. John Mahama had 2 chief of staffs, the Honorable Prosper Bani and the Honorable Julius Debra. What has been the convention is that ministers don't just get up and travel on their own volition, by whim and caprice, as they so wish.
And so you
require permission. You write and you wait for express authorization to proceed on that journey. So for the chief of staff to write this memo after 1.5 years in office, raising concern about this disruption in domestic work, it can only...
They didn't raise concern.
It can only... No, you read the memo. I mean, read the memo.
It's just telling them to be so guided that they direct all travels.
You see, this is a government
and it says, it's on the screen, so let me just read. It says the President of the Republic has directed that all foreign travels by ministers, deputy ministers, MMDCs, and heads of government agencies be temporarily suspended with immediate effect. Now it continues, the guidelines in respect of future foreign travels aimed at minimizing disruption to government's domestic work will be communicated to you shortly.
Yes.
The Honorable Foreign Minister, though, has been exempted from
Yes.
this. It doesn't say that there's any abuse of any process of travel or wanton disrespect to any process of travel.
I am telling you.
By your interpretation of the memo.
No. Listen to, you just read it.
Yes, please.
The Chief of Staff states, guidelines in respect of future foreign travels aimed at minimizing disruption to government's domestic work will be communicated to you shortly. What other interpretation is there? It's here.
Government's activities have been disrupted.
Expressly stated.
Because they travel as in the parlance by heart.
Yes. If we'll use that expression. So you see the point I have made, I mean, and I'm glad you listened to me yesterday in my reaction to this, is that there has been a convention. And the convention is that chief of staffs regulate these travels. Ministers don't just travel outside. So either that convention was sidestepped, they abandoned it, and then there was a chaotic situation, indiscipline, and now they are waking up to their responsibility, or it is that the chief of staff's office has not really been up and doing. And this is not, it's not about the person. I have a lot of respect for Madam Frima Osawapari. Maximum respect for her as a person. I'm talking about her office. And I'm saying that this statement portrays two possibilities. One, either the convention, since the era of President Rawlings, President Kufuor, President Mills, President Mahama, of chief of staffs being on top of their job and working. When I heard the deputy chief of staff say that they want to put up modalities and guidelines, it exists. I'm surprised that he's probably they are not talking to their predecessors. It does exist, and that has been the convention. So either they are not doing their work, or they are not doing their work properly. Those are the only two possibilities that exist. So, I mean, honestly, this is just a propaganda stunt. Let's create the impression that
there's an internal memo that was supposed to be made public. So.
But I mean, who leaked the internal memo? And we have not heard government raise concern. You've heard the deputy chief of staff happily speaking to a leaked internal memo. I mean, we have been in government communication before. I mean, when
you used to leak memos.
Why is the deputy?
Is that what you're saying?
Why is the deputy chief of staff happily speaking to it, not raising any concern about the leak? And if you look at, did you monitor the pro-MPP newspapers yesterday?
Which are the pro-MPP newspapers?
Daily Guide, Statesman,
Daily Guide,
Statesman. Yeah, the Blue Weight, and you know they want us to applaud the president. The president is trying to protect the public purse, and I say that what will really impress Ghanaians, if the president wants to protect the public purse, is to reduce the number of ministers. The record number of ministers of 110 is what Ghanaians want addressed, so that we see that you are really committed to reducing public expenditure.
Your short comment on this, and then we'll move on, because he traveled along the coast of...
some of these things, I guess, don't surprise Ghanaians any longer. Putting a spin to achieve...
Who is spinning?
He is.
Well,
to achieve a certain...
He's making an interpretation of the statement.
Yeah, of course, but your interpretation...
What did the chief of staff mean by minimizing disruption to government domestic work?
Let's just say that no regulations have been complied with. So it is wrong to conduct a review at a certain point in the management of an office. It is wrong. The chief of staff cannot review the processes of foreign travel by ministers and extend it to MMDAs and state agencies. She cannot review it.
When they're causing disruption, they need great review.
So she cannot review it.
And I'm saying that when they're causing disruptions, then they need great review.
If she does that and issues directives that, look, after reviewing our performance over a certain period, we think that it's important we put a stop or a temporary ban on the extent of travel by ministers, and which has always been the case, like he said, that they seek approvals from the office of the chief of staff before they travel. But this time around, it's been extended to MMDCEs and heads of government agencies. Okay? And that we are going to issue fresh guidelines on who attends what conferences and what kind of representation that the Republic of Ghana sends to those conferences. And it's become an issue for political spinning. We can't continue to do this to ourselves all the time. What she has done is commendable. That at least there's a sense that, look, this thing ought to be reviewed. And when the review leads to a reduction in the number of people who travel, is that not a savings to the Republic? Is that not? Travel is discretionary. Okay? And she can exercise her discretion in a manner that may save the public purse or not save the public purse. And in any event, she won't be at fault. But it's important that you conduct a review regularly. And that's exactly what the chief of staff has done. Do we have to put political spin on this one too? And say that, well, it may be one of two things, that she's not been working over the past 18 months.
Who said that?
That's what he said. Is that the interpretation that we need to put to some of these things? So please, I mean, Roland, it's important too. We have a nation to build. We have several things that should engage our minds and engage the kinds of conversations that we have. And I don't think playing politics with some of these things is the way to go at all.
When the travels consistently, according to the statement, disrupting government domestic work. Government is supposed to focus on activities,
absolutely,
really.
Yes.
And those that have been appointed, according to the statement, are not sitting down home to work. They're not sitting down in the office, they're traveling. So they have to be regulated. There needs to be some sanity.
I think it's a positive.
Right. And you also did some travel, because we know that about two or 3 weeks
to put a temporary ban on his travel.
At my own cost. Mine was at my own cost.
I thought you said it was at the minorities' expense.
No, at my own cost. On behalf of the minority.
Oh, is that so?
But I opted to fund it. Yeah.
Now we know that
must be
you issued a statement.
Yes.
And it follows what had been reported widely by the international media about the ship. The acquirers, as well as those that were on board, the professionals, the MSF and the others calling for aid. First they had gone to the Italian coast, they were not received by the government, they went to the Maltese coast and ultimately got some amnesty from the Spanish government, etc. And over 620, I believe, people. And since you issued a statement, and you went to some of the places, and you saw some migrants. Apparently, some Ghanaians were also involved.
Yes.
And you think that the government is not up and doing, but that's not fair, is it? It's not. The president has been speaking widely on this. Has also been up and doing, making sure his foreign minister is doing what has to be done to make sure Ghanaians who travel safely are safe when they get to their destinations.
Well, Roland, I must thank you for bringing this matter up. It's a very, very important issue. I left the port city of Valencia by the weekend with a heavy heart. What I saw and my interaction with these migrants, I focused on the Ghanaian migrants, though I interacted with a few from Nigeria and South Sudan. Roland, you don't want to ever be in that situation. And I wanted to understand how they manage to get on those boats, those dinghies. And they tell me that the route apparently is Techiman to Niger.
That has been known.
And
it's
then,
been well documented.
And then, yes, and then from Niger to Libya. And then Libya, they managed to pay some ringleaders, clearly people engaging in human trafficking, and then they get on the Mediterranean Sea. Now, what is worrying, Roland, is that they tell me that less than 10% of those who begin the journey make it. That between Niger and Libya. That's where the first round of deaths begin. The deserts, very harsh weather conditions. It's the hottest place anywhere in the world. It has all these gang leaders, militias that are operating there, and they extort from them. If you don't have money, they kill you. So about half of them die between Niger and Libya, according to their account. Then in Libya now too, because of the chaotic situation, you don't have one government really in control of that country. They tell me that they fall prey to terrorist groups. Again, if you don't have anything for them, you are just killed. Then they manage, the few of them that survive, manage to then see these human traffickers, ringleaders who operate these rubber-inflated dinghies, and they put them on board so that they would arrive,
that is
at the Italian
and
coast.
you're saying this is the fault of the president and his government?
No, what I'm saying is that I am surprised that we are not having a major discussion on this matter. This is the biggest.
Today,
this is the biggest issue in Europe now.
It didn't start today.
I'm not saying it started today.
Okay. So your point is what?
The point is that apparently hundreds upon hundreds are dying every week. We need to take action as a government, as a people, as leaders, all of us, MPs. First, there has to be public education. Two, we have to identify those migrant routes and carry out a national security intervention.
And in your statement, you said it is not acceptable that the Akufo-Addo government appears so far to have totally abdicated its responsibility on this matter, and therefore offering absolutely no leadership whatsoever.
Exactly.
What did you mean by this?
Exactly. I'm coming there. So I'm talking about the leadership required. So first, this is not a national issue. It's not on the national agenda.
Why should it be? We have school fees to pay.
President Akufo-Addo has told
you know that we have to pay schools.
Human lives don't matter.
Well, they
if
do matter.
If your youth are dying, how can you pay their school fees? They are dying. Hundreds are dying every week. And it's rather the Europeans who have made this a major issue. There was a special summit of the European Union last Sunday. There's another one coming up on Thursday. And unfortunately for us, right-wing parties are emerging in the leadership of these European countries. And so it's not even going to be easy. You see how the Italians and the Maltese turned them away. They spent another 5 days before the new Spanish government intervened. And when I arrived there, they were very, very exhausted, seasick. You know, some of them had died. So these are serious matters. And any country, any government that values human lives, the lives of its citizens, does not turn the other way, does not pretend this is not going on, does not keep quiet. This must break our conscience. It cannot continue. So I'm trying to put this on the agenda, that let all of us, media, MPs, all of us, let's start public education. Let's identify those migrant routes. Let's block it, because even with education, people may still want to take the risk. And then our economic programs, clearly, yes, lots of slogans upon slogans, but it's not impacting. And so this year, according to statistics, 340,000 have arrived via the Mediterranean Sea.
Not only Ghanaians.
In
not
Europe.
only
Yes,
Ghanaians.
not only Ghanaians. But you know what? There are thousands that have died.
How many Ghanaians did you see
Probably
in
3 times,
in the
4
shelter
times
there?
that
How many
number.
Ghanaians did you
29 Ghanaians.
29?
Yes. And surprisingly, no African government official has been there. No embassy staff has gone there. Nobody. It's only the French government officials who arrived, saying that, you know, that President Macron also said they are willing to take some of the migrants, those who opt to go to France. And I'm saying that this must prick our conscience and we must take action. We can't allow this to continue.
Is that really the case that the government doesn't care about?
It's interesting how BBC is reporting 7 hours ago, Dachawala, that Lifeline, Spain refuses docking to migrants rescue boat as bad weather loads. The Telegraph of UK is reporting 1 day ago that 1,000 migrants stranded in the Mediterranean as Italian ports remain closed. How Mr. Okudjete then happen to have met these people who are stranded on sea last weekend. It's interesting.
Oh no, this is it.
But
This one, the
you see-
Aquarius.
Yes, it's the Aquarius I'm talking
There are
about. But
pictures.
yeah,
No,
that's
no.
beside
They
the
have
point.
doc. You see, this cynical approach. It's a serious matter. There are pictures of me interacting with them. I went to the
single
camp.
Ghanaian life, as far as I'm concerned,
Well, as far as we're concerned, it's been reported
is
widely.
important.
Yeah, they have,
That the
this
Spanish
particular-
government has taken them.
Yes, this particular group, the 629,
Every
have been accepted.
single Ghanaian life
And these are pictures.
These are the pictures. I
is
met them.
important. And so I am happy for us to have a conversation about what it is that we do to protect Ghanaian lives. In fact, build a better country that enables them stay here. But when you put out a statement in the manner that my very good friend Sammy here does, it elevates it into a conversation that gets into the political arena and we banter. Because you see, a simple Google search, 2015, 2014, will indicate to you headlines of Ghanaians who are stranded in Libya, in Italy, in Spain, on the Mediterranean. At the time, we were in government. Those lives were not important. At the time, your government was showing leadership. Such that today, when these issues are still persisting, His Excellency the President is the one who is not showing leadership.
So now it's equalization.
It's not.
He's saying that
You see,
it's
Roland,
become more important than ever.
Roland,
Yes, sir.
You see, I choose my words very carefully. And I premise this statement with the phrase that, as far as I'm concerned, every Ghanaian life is important. And that I'm happy to have a conversation on what it is that we do to improve our well-being so our Ghanaian youth do not go out there. People from my constituency go on those dangerous routes to go and seek better economic life out there. And so I'm happy to have that conversation. But if you put it in the light that he did, you leave us with no choice because it is sensationalism that he's doing. It is attributing blame for these unfortunate incidents on His Excellency the President. When we as a country have had these incidents over years, at the time that when you were in government, what did you do about it?
So it should continue.
I'm not saying they should continue, but I expect...
So what are you saying?
Look, Roland,
Yes,
I
sir.
expect that as the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, having been in the know of these matters, would put it in the public domain and invite government to address it. Yes.
Is that not what he's done?
That's not what he did.
That's
Look,
what I did.
read the statement.
I've read the statement.
That's what I did.
Have you read the entire statement?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
One moment.
One
moment.
Is it that you don't like his
No,
choice of words?
please. If you say that it is not acceptable that the Akufo-Addo government appears so far to have totally abdicated on this matter and therefore offering absolutely no leadership whatsoever, what are you doing? When during your era, this same issue persisted, at the time, was your government not showing leadership? Is that what you are saying? That you failed to show leadership, and so His Excellency the President should show leadership now. If you go further to say that President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo must realize the future of our country is at stake. 3-4 years ago, was the future of our country not at stake? So that's the context. If you put the statement in that context, yes, Bawumia, let's have a national conversation. I'm perfectly in support of that conversation.
But that's what we're having this
But
conversation.
yes, don't put political twist to it because it doesn't help. It will lead us to come with this kind of defense that I'm coming up with. Okay? And it doesn't help the discourse. These are issues. There are no jobs in this country. There's been no jobs in this country for the longest. We have to find solutions to that problem so our young men can stay here, So let's have the conversation. Okay? What can we do as a nation to improve on our economic well-being so our young men
You also said the statistics have not been good.
a perilous journey.
Of jobs that need to be created, and those young people who need to be working in that category of age also out of jobs.
I agree entirely. And so let's have that conversation. What is it that can be done? This is one district, one factory. This noble idea can take shape so our young men can get work to do. I'm happy to have that conversation. But let's not politicize everything.
You think mentioning the president's name is politicizing?
And attributing that he is failing to show leadership, I think it's being political. Completely.
You look very incensed.
No, I'm not.
You are.
And look, you see,
you're not. You look
I'm not
flustered.
at all. I'm
You're-
not. I'm
you're
extremely passionate about our country, Ghana,
Okay.
and what it is that
You look rather passionate about this.
we who are privileged to be given an opportunity to lead should share the conversation
Right.
so that we can build a better country for all of us.
Okay.
Let's not politicize it. Of course, it's good that you have gone there and you have interacted with the people. Bring it to the attention of the appropriate authorities
And
and
that's
let
what
them
he's
take
done, I
action.
believe.
I'm saying that if you cast the statement that he did, and Roland, you've been in this game for long.
Which
you
game?
know that this journalism.
Okay.
Okay, you
Yes.
know the twist that he puts to it. You know Sami, I know him very well. Let's not do this.
Oh my God.
It's only a plea. By all means, and before we came, I indicated that, look, yes, but how else can we find solutions to problems if they are not highlighted? Highlight it. And I'm happy you highlight it. But let's not put political spin on everything. It doesn't help.
Very well. Very well. Somebody said,
I would have
tell
to.
Andre Japamesa to address the issue. The government didn't do that. If in the past government didn't do anything to save Ghanaians, doesn't mean that the NPP government should also sit and watch our youth die in the seas of Europe and in the Mediterranean. After all, why did Ghanaians change government in 2016? And that's from Yahuza Mushizongo Tamale.
But I've not said indecent, have I?
He didn't say you were being indecent. That's not what he said.
So Roland, I'm having a lot of difficulty with my good brother's submission.
Well, you mentioned the president. You say you use a word like abdicate.
You see, initially he even sought to cast doubt about whether I had really met the migrants, because he was confusing what had happened with the Aquarius to other recent reports.
That shows that there are more.
There are more. And that shows that what they told me, that every week hundreds are dying because they are on this perilous journey, is true. So you see, let's not be cynical. Now you say, why will I mention the president? As soon as you mention the president, you introduce politics. Who is our leader? Who controls the national purse? Who is commander-in-chief of the armed forces? Some of the interventions required, which I am recommending based on what I have heard, a national security situation. I cannot, who dare me to call Kandapa, the Honorable Kandapa, the National Security Coordinator, or the Honorable Defense Minister, and give him instructions that go and close the borders, go and mount surveillance, and protect our youth? Who can do that? I can do that, he can do, you can do that. It's only the president. And I didn't insult the president. I didn't attack the president. All I'm saying is that the president has abdicated. He's not showing leadership. This matter, it's as if if you come to Africa, you are in Ghana, it's like this is not going on at all. Meanwhile, in Europe, all the newspapers are bought. I mean, it's the front page story. It's the biggest issue.
Because it's a big issue for them.
Yes. You know,
because the influx of them is affecting their economy, their livelihoods.
Meanwhile, this is an African problem. It is our citizens.
And that is why you want us to put it.
That's why I'm saying that. Look,
it's not because you're politicizing it.
No, it's not because I'm politicizing it. The European nations, their leaders, their president, prime ministers are at the forefront, trying to profess solutions, come up with policy interventions. Do you know that the latest discussion they are even having at this last Sunday's EU mini summit, they are considering coming to put up a post in Africa, so that when they rescue them on the Mediterranean, they don't.
Well, just last night,
break them to Europe.
There was a decision by the Italian new government to decide to put together a whole post and somebody to be responsible in Libya, etc. And the Libyan government and the various factions in there are having none of it.
Yes, you know. So
that's what you want us to.
African leaders are quiet. We are just totally silent. as if this is not going on, as if our cities are not dying. And I'm saying that you can't issue a serious statement, make serious recommendations, and not call on the commander-in-chief, the man who has the mandate, the president of our country, to make this an agenda item and to take it up. That's all I'm doing. I'm not trying to introduce politics. If you don't want us to mention President Akufo-Addo's name, tell us that the name is reserved for only MPP supporters, so that all of us, we should stay away. Then let us know.
This clearly is not what I said. And,
yeah, because
and let's not.
But how do we start a certain process and a whole policy initiative that could also be a part of our contribution to stem the tide? Because we have Ghanaians who are there. Largely, we have Nigerians, etc.
I mean, by and large, many of these people who migrate through this tortuous route, the peril of their lives, are purely economic migrants. Purely. They don't have jobs, and that's the reality.
No, but we still have people who left behind who don't have jobs too, but they decide to make a living
absolutely
somehow.
So it's a risk, factor on what it is that everybody's tolerance level is that would determine who leaves and makes that journey and who stays. So I'm happy to have that conversation, by all means, because we need to improve our country. We need to create jobs.
As
we need to create opportunities.
What interventions, for example, his statement says that we need to make sure that we guard the borders, the exit points of these migrants, and then also try to conscientize them, sensitize them that it is dangerous. You don't have a job, but you don't have to go and die on the desert or go and find yourself ultimately.
And look, people have approached me, my constituents.
They want to go.
Of course.
Okay.
And they want me to provide funding for them to go.
Funding
and I tell them that, look,
are you saying you've started funding some of your constituents?
He will never do.
I will not do it because I do not see why I should even encourage anybody to go through this turbulence,
So
what
should we do?
Yeah, so yes, we need to work to ensure that our one district, one factory initiative that clearly is going to create jobs for some of these our youth is enhanced. We need to expedite the processes of
Mr. Blackwell, they say you support one district, one facility.
We've always supported it. Just that it's becoming an empty slogan. It's not happening.
Clearly would inform some of our youth about the dangers associated with these things and encourage them to stay here. But we need to create opportunities here for them to be able to get something to do when they stay.
Point made. It looks like my time is up, unfortunately. And I know you'll be following up this issue. Make sure that it gets the traction that it needs so that we can all help. And the Honourable Member for Secondary also said that...
his constituents, putting pressure on him to fund them. So he should support us to really highlight this.
Well, I've had in the studio...
I always support a legitimate cause.
I mean
but when you put...
There's no mistake.
No, please. I mean, there is...
Well, in the studio, Samuel Kujetua Blakwa, Member of Parliament for North Tongue, but also a ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament. He travelled to the port city, Spanish port city of Valencia. That's where you went. And where else?
Valencia, yeah.
You didn't go
Valencia
to
and Shente,
where
the camp is.
You should have gone to Ibiza, great holiday destination.
Unfortunately,
you didn't go for holiday.
No, I didn't go for holiday.
And we know that there are many others who get stranded.
They are keeping all the holiday cash.
Rather.
And we know that there are many other migrants who are along the shores of Lampedusa and many of the areas just bordering the Mediterranean. And we hope that the government will do something about it. And Andrew Japamesa, Member of Parliament for Secondary, also here. Thanks for joining me, Andrew.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Well, we have to move on because you know that regularly this is the channel for you, the Science and Maths Quiz, and we'll be bringing to you latest highlights from the ground.
But in the meantime, what's happened to my school? I don't know.
I decided. I think you are out.
Oh, really?
How about Presec?
Oh, they are in. Presec, I think they are also out.
We're still in there.
No, they are still in. Presec is still in. Okay, Adisadel, I'm being mischievous. Adisadel and Presec, they are still in. Case closed. We're taking a break. We'll be right back.
Great.